So you found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Nuknach! What judge och? Dag judge Niteb nadev jich. Kent Hovind je, Tutlu. Dapper dino jich.
Edge, Kent Hovind jich.
Dag judge, what judge vad Klingon hol with judge tach, kara.
Geslag, kar. Wedge nach, judge vad Klingon hol vijach pu, jich vad chu.
Hom up vad chu je. Well, okay. Sorry about that. We're just kidding. We're not actually going to do this whole thing in Klingon, even though it is Empire Day, which, of course, as I'm sure everyone knows, is the anniversary of the first episode of the original Star Trek series to feature Klingons, Errand of Mercy, which aired in 1967 on March 23rd. So
Well, that's today.
Exactly. So, of course, we're celebrating Empire Day, and so everyone, I hope, as described in my tweet about this, should have some Klingon-appropriate drink. For instance, we'll drink for Godzilla real quick. For instance, some examples of acceptable Klingon beverages include, but are not limited to, Warnog, blood wine, Romulan ale, or of course prune juice, as Kent Hovind is displaying right here.
This is prune juice.
It is. Now, you might say to yourself, prune juice isn't an appropriate Klingon drink, to which I say, here you go.
What is it?
Just try it. You see? Prune juice.
Warrior's drink.
There you go. See? I proved it. Alright, so we're doing Kent with Bent, of course, as we do. I was going to say every Tuesday, but it's not technically true. Because sometimes on Tuesday we do other things. I do want to say, I will be on Gutsa Gibbons' channel about a half an hour after we stop Kent with Bent. So if you want to see me over there, go check that out. And we might as well go over the rules, right? You know. So let's see. The rules are that we drink whenever Godzilla comes. So also Mothra. Also, if you're a channel member, which you can join for as little as $1.99 a month, you gain access to the emojis, and if you super chat with a Godzilla or Mothra emoji, we'll take a drink for that. We also take a drink whenever Kent Hovind gets something right, where he's not just quoting from someone else. Let's see. We also take a drink whenever Kent Hovind tells a joke that doesn't land. Whenever it's just so stupid we kind of have to. And while we don't talk about it as much, maybe we should, we also tend to take a drink if we're not sure what's going to come up next, but we get some predictions. And if one of those predictions is right, then that's always impressive enough that we can take a little drink for it. All right, so Bent, have I forgotten anything?
I think, isn't there one where we do sometimes where if it's like a...
Oh, things that didn't happen, yeah. Hashtag things that didn't happen.
Yeah.
That is accurate. So I don't want to forget that. That is an important one. Yeah. Now also, because it is Empire Day, while we're not going to be doing everything in Klingon, we will be saying a few things, hopefully, in Klingon. So get ready for that. And of course, we'll let you know what we're saying if it comes up. So
we might let you know.
Well, I'll probably let you know. I want people to have fun and not just be confused.
Okay. Dapper will let you know. I will consider it.
Okay. All right. So I don't think there's anything more to delay us from getting into Kent Hovind, which is just...
Yeah. 4 minutes.
It is a thing.
4 minutes.
Now, the Venerable Bee says, is Dr. Pepper a warrior's drink? Actually, I'm going to go ahead and say probably. There's a class of Klingon beverages called Aujet, and the gloss is usually given as root beer, but it contains a lot of sort of bitter flavored, non-alcoholic beverages. And I think that Dr. Pepper, as well as root beer, would probably both fall under the category of Aujet. So here we go. And make sure that everyone let me know if you can hear Kent, because we should be able to, but you never know.
How would they know that? Well, if you've ever seen Niagara Falls, you know it's a lot of water going over the edge there. And
technically, that is correct. So you know what? Lourd. Petlut, which means, of course, he's right. Drink.
As the water goes over the edge, it breaks off the rocks on the edge, so the falls is eroding its way backwards. All waterfalls do this, depending on how hard the material is, and how much water goes over it, and how abrasive it is. If there's lots of stuff in the water, like sand and ice and tree stumps, it's more abrasive, it's tend to erode faster. But the Niagara Falls is breaking rocks off the edge. The indication, since it was first discovered and at least recorded by scientists up there, back in the 1700s, they marked where it was. It's been progressively moving backwards. The Niagara Falls Museum Guide says it's been going 4.7 feet a year. That's what's been observed for several hundred years. Now, that doesn't mean the erosion rate's always been the same, but if you get a several hundred-year average, that's something to consider. Okay?
Yeah, I'd agree.
Now, Niagara Falls flows down into what's called the Niagara Gorge, a canyon at the bottom of the falls. It's absolute. You've been there, haven't you, Eric? Saw Niagara Falls? We went over in a helicopter, didn't we? That was amazing. Anybody else been there to Niagara Falls? Just, you can't imagine it.
Oh, wait,
in 1930...
Wait, there's a question from the chat asking, what am I wearing?
Oh my goodness.
This is a lovely... Well, as you can see from the shirt I'm wearing, you can't see the shirt I'm wearing because this lovely pink tutu is covering it up.
Now, why are you wearing a tutu?
Well, there's kind of a thing that happens on this channel where if the channel receives enough donation money in one stream, the Dapper Dino will have a tutu, a pink tutu on the next video you make. But if it's double that amount, then I'll wear the pink tutu.
Yep.
You just happen to just go right up to the double.
Yep.
On one of the last times you did a live stream, so
it was my marathon stream for debunking Genesis Apologetics. The next one of which is not this Saturday, but will be the Saturday after. This Saturday I'm doing a Leaving Earth Creationism. So
here it is. Ta-da!
Hooray! So yeah, that is actually not because it's Empire Day. That is a coincidence. But
yeah, very coincidental, but great question in chat.
And of course, still though, Happy Empire Day, or as they say, won't judge, dative judge.
They do say that.
Yeah.
They do say that indeed.
I believe it was 1930, somewhere in there.
Sorry, someone's trying to come and arrest Bent for wearing a tutu? That's not very nice.
They built a canal to drain the water off of the river to a hydroelectric plant. So the water has to flow through their turbines as it falls to produce electricity. Which means much...
Why are you wearing the tutu around your neck? Well, because if you wore it around the waist, it just wouldn't show up on camera. We tried that. It didn't work.
Yeah, you wouldn't see it.
Yeah. So...
Do you want to see it, or do you not want to see it?
Right, it's one of those things, like, if
I'm
Bent...
not just going to stand this whole time.
It's sort of like Kent Hovind might be wearing clown shoes, but what difference does it make?
Right, yeah.
Or
I'm doing this for
even
you.
Right. Yes, they are normally worn around the waist, but if you want them to be seen, you kind of have to wear them where the camera shows them. So, you know.
sometimes all of the water can be channeled away and they dry up the waterfall, which stops erosion. But up until 1930, it was eroding 4.7 feet a year. Since then, it's eroded slower because they're diverting much water for hydroelectric power.
Ooh.
They usually turn on the falls during tourist season, and for the rest of the year, they basically almost shut them down. They can divert the water to this hydroelectric plant. So they leave some going over for the tourist effect, you know. But they could, sometimes in real drought seasons, they'll have to use it all. Niagara, if you look at the Great Lakes, the 5 Great Lakes, they drain into each other. One fills up and spills over into the next one and spills over into the next one. This is the point where Lake Erie spills over into, what's the lake above it? Ontario? Yes, Lake Ontario. So as it spills over, it runs through this little channel called the Niagara River, which is not very long. The right side, or the left side is Canada, the right side is New York. This town of Buffalo, New York is right there. And
I've been there.
Ontario, Canada on the other side. But Niagara Falls has moved back about 7.5 miles from where it started. You can tell where it started by the edge of the old cliff. Moved back 7.5 miles. Now, The textbook here says it's been eroding for 9,900 years. Well, they get that number from taking, 7.5 miles divided by how fast it's moving back. Actually, they didn't do their math very well either. For this public school textbook, it should have been 8,400 years, not 9,900 years. If you take 7.5 miles times 5,280 feet in a mile, divided by 4.7, you get 8,400 years. But what do you expect? It's public school textbook.
More thorough math that they just kind of summed up.
Yeah, I was going to say, my guess is they didn't just assume a flat linear rate of erosion. That's going to be my guess.
It's a minor point, but
yeah.
It just shows that Kent Hovind doesn't ever consider that experts might do something like that.
It's not accurate in lots of other places too. But the reason Niagara Falls is where it is because of the flood 4,400 years ago. Right after the flood was over, you would have two factors that you don't have today. You would have more water flowing over and softer dirt.
Why? The flood is over. Why is there more water?
Explain, Kent. Explain why.
Maybe he will.
Right after the flood, you get earth covered with layers of sediment. It's going to take a while for that to get hard.
That's what she said.
Maybe first 10 years, it would get a certain percentage of its hardness and then gradually get harder as time goes along. And today it's solid rock. But for the first 10 or 15 years, it was probably much, much softer. Especially the first few weeks, as the water's running off from this flood, it probably eroded half of the gully or the valley in a few minutes.
A citation needed. I mean, you haven't done any math. All you just said is like, oh, some sediments might be softer. I don't even know what the rocks around Niagara Valley are. Are they even sedimentary? I don't know. He doesn't even bother to tell us.
Remember that gravel pit we went motorcycle riding in all the time after that one big rainstorm made a giant canyon about a third as big as this roof?
Speaking of rainstorms, that actually does bring up something that I need to say as a bit of a housekeeping thing. So where I am right now, it is actually fairly stormy, and I cannot guarantee that I won't lose connection or even electricity. So if something like that happens, my apologies, and in advance, just might happen. It's a thing. Sorry, guys.
Boom. Just after one rainstorm. It's unbelievable what water can do when it really gets moving.
Yes, to unconsolidated gravel, that is true. But you haven't actually demonstrated that that was the case for the Grand Canyon when it started. And one of the reasons that we know it wasn't, and why, of course, we know Chip, or he's stupid, is that there's actually a sheer cliff there, with sheer cliff edges. When water washes out soft sediment, as you can actually see on video from Dinosaur Adventureland, where they broke a dam on their property, it creates smooth spillways. So, yeah, even if it were the case that there were a flood, and after the flood, the sediments stayed, fairly soft for a while, a Niagara Falls type situation wouldn't result in a hard-edged cliff. It would result in a spillway. So I'm taking a drink for how stupid that was. Petluk.
The other problem you have is when water really gets going, it picks up lots of debris, and it becomes like liquid sandpaper. So now it erodes even faster because of the abrasiveness of the material. Okay.
I mean, yeah, I guess that's kind of the point of sandblasting with water, but whatever.
Niagara Falls.
He was already talking about that.
Take a quiz here. Not a quiz, but ask a few questions. Who was responsible, one of the main guys responsible for turning our education system humanist? He signed the Humanist Manifesto. John Dewey. There we go. Good. What year was the Humanist?
Yeah, I don't know why that is something that's important. And by the way, chat, of course, means that's stupid. It's basically what turning the education system quote-unquote humanist basically means is we're not going to prefer one religion over another, and we're going to teach things that can be demonstrated from a secular or scientific standpoint. So, and hey, you know what? If you want to have a religious schooling, that's great. Send your kids to a religious school. I mean, look, I went to a Catholic high school, so, my family wasn't even Catholic. They're still not, unless something has changed. Oh, hey. My alarm for Kent with Bent went off because we're actually going a bit early today. So
Manifesto signed, the first one. 1933. You like raisins? 1933. What year did Darwin's book come out?
Yeah, well, this probably wasn't, pandemic times. People were less concerned at the time.
Honestly, I scratch my face so much. I'd probably do the same thing and wouldn't even notice.
Yeah.
59. There we go. All right. You got that one? Let's see. I'm going to think of another question. Okay, I got it. The Niagara River runs...
Oh, yeah, was that
It was a joke.
But it landed.
And it landed.
So we don't take a drink for a joke that landed.
You can't tell because I don't know what. I guess I have a 1080p cam, but I had a slight smirk here.
Oh.
You guys probably couldn't see it.
Well, then that definitely landed.
Subtle. But yeah, it's like a full-on laughter for me.
It's into what lake? Lake Ontario. Somebody got it over there too. Who was that? Did you get that, brother? You did? You'll take the raisin. Okay, good.
So
How long is the
Yeah.
valley at the bottom of Niagara Gorge? 7.5 miles. There we go. And what's the erosion rate right now? 4.7 feet a year. Okay, good. Have some more in a minute.
See, this is actually kind of illustrative of Kent Hovind's approach. He will memorize random bits of trivia that are completely unimportant, but they make him sound to people who don't actually bother to examine the arguments like he kind of knows what he's talking about. Like, my goodness, he knows how long the river channel is across the Niagara River, and he knows the current erosion rate. I mean, he must know what he's talking about. But the thing is, there's no deeper understanding. He just has these really weird bits of trivia. And it's all he has. And for $5 from Vandalia 1998, we have, if you count frozen glaciers as a flood, then yes, a flood did cover the Great Lakes area. I mean, that's true. Although generally, floods have to be liquid. I don't normally consider glaciers to be a flood. But actually,
that was the ice canopy was that glacier.
Oh, the ice canopy
it
fell?
Wasn't very high off the ground. It was like just a few microns, but humans were so small then, because, I don't know, the oxygen levels were whatever Kent Hovind needs them to be. Who knows?
Nice.
Look at a couple more facts here and we'll take a little break. The oceans are getting saltier every day.
Lourd. Petluch. That's correct. Take a drink.
I had quite an interesting debate last night with the two very skeptical students that came to the meeting when I spoke in Alabama, and they argued about this point for quite a while. They said the oceans are not getting saltier. Well, there's...
Okay, so, Rochvet. That didn't happen. So, Petluch. I seriously doubt any students came up to him and said that the oceans... That their entire argument was, the oceans aren't getting saltier. I mean, they're not appreciably because of things that actually take minerals out of the ocean, but I doubt that that was their entire argument.
Many lengthy studies have been done about the salinity of the oceans. Waters from the river flow into the oceans, obviously. All of them end up there eventually.
No, they don't. Has he not heard of things like the Jordan River? It's in the Bible, Kent. Maybe you've heard of it. It ends in the Dead Sea, a thing that isn't the ocean. Or what about the rivers that empty into, say, I don't know, the Great Salt Lake? Or is it the Caspian Sea? I think it's the Caspian Sea.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Kent also doesn't know.
Well, yeah, so no, it is not the case that all rivers empty into the ocean.
At least he didn't when he made this video.
Yeah.
About 30% of the rainwater goes into the oceans. The rest is evaporated back right off the land or soaks into the water table, the aquifer is called. As the water evaporates out of the ocean, it leaves behind all of its salt. What's this process called?
The water cycle? What does it mean?
As the oceans get saltier, it's called salination,
I don't know,
but the removing of fresh water
Oh.
is called evaporation or desalination. There's a couple other names for it.
Is he trying to say desalinization? Is that what he's trying to say?
I don't know what he's talking about.
Oh.
Like, he's going back and forth with it.
It desalinates the water. There are emergency crews or kits that they put on aircraft if they crash in the ocean. They have a little ball you blow up full of air, the sunlight will distillation it's called. It'll distill the salt water and make it and separate the salt from the fresh water. And it makes about a quart a day, so you got to be careful. Don't take a bath every morning. There was a guy who wanted to see if he could row across the ocean in a rowboat.
All right, I want to read
Right away,
something.
you got to wonder.
Okay.
Because I remember learning something on the Food Network.
What? No.
Salt comes from two main sources, seawater and the sodium chloride mineral halite known as rock salt, which was, at one point from seawater.
So it all comes from the
salt,
sea.
And I could be wrong, but if I'm wrong, so was Alton Brown. All salt in the world comes from the ocean, or something that was once seawater.
That's broadly, once salt water. Yeah, that's true. Because there are saltwater deposits that leave behind halites that weren't the ocean, like the Dead Sea. But
so why does Kent think that the ocean was freshwater and then salt just appeared in it?
Because it helps his argument.
Was there just one big old thing of salt once? Is all the salt from Lot's wife?
No, this is the salt from thousands of years of the land salts washing into the ocean salt.
I bet the salt was in the canopy of ice.
It was salt ice. Yeah.
That's where it was.
Well, space is really cold, even though it isn't.
Well, it is and it isn't.
It mostly isn't, though.
It mostly is, I'd say, undefined for temperature.
Yeah.
Or essentially undefined.
Yeah.
About the guy. Okay. But he decided he could train his body to drink salt water. So he started a couple of months early, before the trip, drinking just a little bit of salt water, along with the rest of his water throughout the day.
Don't do this to your kidneys, kids. Not medical advice, but still, don't do it.
Yeah, please don't kill yourself. Not medical advice, but
yeah, don't do things that are likely.
Destroy your internal organs.
Yeah,
please.
Yeah.
He would just add a little bit of salt water. Over a period of several months, I think it was 6 months, he got used to salt water. He could drink it.
Gonna need a citation.
What happens typically when people get out in the ocean?
To the taste of it.
Yeah, there you go.
that's what he's saying.
And they're dying of
a little bit of
thirst.
saltier water.
They will wait until they're just about.
Not the same thing as drinking ocean.
No.
To die, and then they stick the head overboard and start drinking salt water, which makes them get sick and vomit. So they
What
lose
is
more
the point
fluids,
of this, Kent?
and they end up dying of dehydration in the middle of water. The Navy had an expression: "Water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink." Right. So they.
So if this is possible, why hasn't the Navy been training sailors to drink salt water the whole time? I mean, I don't know if you remember, Bent, but I remember a whole big section of the engine room being dedicated to removing salt from water so that we could use it for cooking and drinking and things. But I also remember everything that could use salt water on the ship. It didn't have to be fresh water. It was. The toilets were salt water. The laundry was salt water. I mean, if it didn't absolutely need to be fresh, it was salt water on the ship. So,
dude, the laundry was so bad.
I know. You were washing your clothes in salt water. It was terrible.
Washing your clothes on an aircraft carrier is one of the worst. I can't imagine a worse experience doing laundry.
Oh, yeah, if you hadn't added doing laundry, I might have objected, but then you said doing laundry. I don't know. Doing your laundry in ocean water on a little, scrub board, that would be worse.
No, it wouldn't.
No?
I don't think it would. I don't think it would.
All right, well.
Do you remember that laundry setup we had?
Yeah.
All right, real quick, because it's off topic, but you had to sign up, and it usually is the middle of the night, and you hope that the machines you get work, because if not, oh well. And then your clothes don't get clean or dry anyway. So I'd rather just scrub them, not in the middle of the night, myself, manually. Probably do a better job. Oh, and it was how hot and how humid in there in the Persian Gulf.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, that was rough.
At least it was the middle of the night for that, but still really hot.
But, yeah, overall, I'm going to go ahead and say that, no, you can't train your body to drink ocean water, because if you could, my goodness, would we have.
This guy decided he could train his body to drink salt water, and he did. And he, I believe, rowed across the ocean and made it quite a ways out without
No, he
just
didn't.
living off the salt water.
You know what? Once again, that didn't
That's
happen.
dangerous.
So take a drink.
That's dangerous because that's suggesting that it's okay for you to try to do that.
Yeah, actually, that is one of those things that does bug me about some of the things Kent does. Like, if you follow Kent Hovind's advice seriously, you could die. I was going to say kill yourself, but like,
dangerous.
I feel like that requires some kind of intentionality. You could accidentally do things that result in your death. So please, don't listen to anything Kent Hovind says. If he tells you that this is a thing you can do and you want to try it, check with other people, like check with a doctor, check with a lawyer, check with anyone with half a brain. I mean, really?
Tweet at the Dapper Dinosaur.
Yeah.
Ask him.
I might. Now, granted, I can't give you legal.
I don't
Well,
check much.
You can tweet at me, and I can't give you legal or medical advice. But if you're like, hey, Dapper, should I eat a whole bunch of cyanide? I will just say no. No, you shouldn't. But check with your doctor anyway. But just don't do it.
You could. It'd be kind of hard on your kidneys, I would think, because they have to filter out.
Oh, you think so, Kent? You think it might be a little bit hard on your kidneys? Yeah, okay. Goodness. That kind of makes me want to reach through the screen and punch him. Because that's the reason that you don't do it. You will kill your kidneys in addition to dehydrating yourself. It's just a really bad idea.
The water, but I guess you could get your body used to this. If anything you do gradually, you probably can get used to. People get used to it.
Yeah, Kent, you think you can get used to gradually getting hit by a sledgehammer? No. No, there are certain things that you can't just gradually get used to. Some things you can, sure. Right? Like, that's why drug tolerance is a thing, right? That's why you can get stronger if you lift weight slowly over time, whereas if you just try to start off doing, like, you know, strongest man in the universe competition stuff, you're probably going to tear something. But there are some things you cannot simply build your way up to tolerating, and seawater is one of them.
Whiskey, I suppose. So I guess you get used to about anything else. But the oceans are getting saltier every day. Now, there's many different salts that go into the ocean. There are aluminum salts and all sorts of different salts. There's a great article about the various different salts washing into the oceans. It's one of the impact articles, IMPACT. I have all of the back issues. They're put out by Institute for Creation Research.
So the interesting thing about that is he mentioned aluminum salts. And if you check the table that talks about ocean salinity as a way to date how old the Earth is based on how salty the ocean is, it lists the amount of time that it would take for the ocean to accumulate the current amount of aluminum salt at the time it was published in 1970, whatever, at 100 years. So, Chot, that's stupid. I'm taking a drink because he's using ICR as a resource, and ICR's own numbers at the time disproved this as a valid method for dating how old the Earth is. So, yeah, just let that one sink in.
CR, they would be well worth getting. Just little one-page articles, they're 10 cents a piece. They started in 1974, I believe, and they do one a month.
10 cents for one page? That is really expensive.
So they're up to number 350 right now. So for $35, you can get all of the back issues. If you really want some fascinating reading. They have...
For 350 pages, $35. I can get another fiction book from like Tor Sci-Fi or something for like $12, and it can be like 400 pages. That is like the worst deal I have ever heard for literature. I cannot believe how bad that is. He's like, it's only 10 cents. It's like, that's a lot for one page of nonsense. And actually... Like, just, no, that's it. That's just a lot for nonsense. Do not. This is, look, I'm not a licensed accountant. This is not financial advice. Don't spend your money on that.
Several of them just on this issue of how much salt goes into the ocean every year, and how much is the ocean gaining, how old can the ocean be based on the amount of salt it gains.
Do you think that at any point they're going to address ways that salt comes out of the ocean? Because that also is a thing that happens. It doesn't happen through evaporation of water, but it still happens. And we know, because based on ICR's own numbers, the universe would have had to have started in like 1870. But I don't think Kent thinks that that's how old the universe is.
Probably not.
And it depends which one of the salts you want to measure. And I don't know, there's probably 50 different salts that they measure in this study. But bottom line is, all of them give different ages, but many of them center around a 5,000 year figure. The ocean could have gotten where
Oh, Robert Essett went Google searching and looks like Pacific salinity has been relatively constant for the last 22 years. Weird.
it is today in less than 5,000 years as far as the amount of salt in the ocean. Today it's 3.6% salt, and it could have gotten there in 5,000 years. Or less. Some of them
Yeah, a lot less.
give less than that. Some of the numbers are like 100,000 years for the salts. So these skeptics...
So why do you cherry pick the ones that work when some of them are way less, like 100, and some of them are way more, like 100,000? Ugh, Pip.
He only cares about evidence that supports his perspective.
My goodness, that was painful.
Dishonest. He is intellectually dishonest. Yeah, that's it.
I hope the Empire appreciates what I put my liver through for them today. It probably won't.
We're saying, well, the ocean is getting rid of its salt. I said, really, how is it doing that? Well, one way they say is when the wind blows, the water sprays up on the beach and dries up and leaves the salt behind. Oh, well, how big of an area does that affect?
Yeah, I'm going to agree that's probably not the major one. But how about this? Did you know that salt can precipitate out of water and fall onto the bottom of the ocean, which lowers the salinity in the water, and oceanic crust will subduct under the continental crust, which then takes that precipitated salt out? There you go. Problem solved.
What, 6 miles from the beach? Do we get any salt spray here? No. You got to be within a very short distance of the beach. As soon as it rains, it washes back in, you know. This is not a good way to get rid of the salt. They're trying to say there are some other methods of the salt being eliminated from the ocean water, and there may be some minor factors here. All this is taken...
There may be, so he didn't check. I'm taking a drink.
There may be some minor factors.
Didn't even check to see if his idea made sense. It was like, hey, these numbers work out even though they don't. I'll use this as an argument.
Intellectually dishonest.
into consideration. If you want to get into the study of this, I would recommend the Impact article. I don't know the number. I could look it up. Impact article. It's one of the early ones in the hundreds about the salinity of the oceans. Well, one of the skeptics asked me in a debate I was in one time. He said, "Now, Mr. Hovind, could you please tell the audience how the freshwater fish survived in Noah's flood?" Interesting question, because today freshwater fish and saltwater fish, can't survive in the opposite environment very long. I said, "Well, sir, and Eric, you'll..."
Wait, he was right about that, so Petluk. I'm being generous today. Mostly because I have to drink my prune juice, because it's a warrior's drink, although my prune juice has rum.
Delicious.
It's not the best beverage I've had, but it is a warrior's beverage, so... Wait, you know what? We need to make sure that it's a warrior's drink.
What is it?
Just try it.
It's delicious, I know that.
You see? Prune juice.
Warrior's drink.
There we go. I like that clip. I just clipped that together.
Find this as you speak. Most of the skeptics, their question is based on a faulty assumption. And all you got to do is look at the question they're asking you and find out where your problem is. Like the guy said, we've got 135,000 layers of ice that are annual rings. How did this happen in 4,400 years?
And your only solution was something that didn't make sense, Kent, which was, oh, maybe during that whole time there were in fact summer thaws, even though there aren't any, and we haven't been able to find any, and there's no reason to think that the climate was much warmer. In fact, we can check the climate from the ice cores. And then you followed up with plains somewhere else, nowhere near where they take the ice cores, got buried under lots of ice too quickly. Yeah.
Well, his question contains a faulty assumption. They're not annual rings. So this guy said, how did the freshwater fish survive in the flood? I said, well, sir, you're assuming the flood...
I just said, that's stupid. He's stupid. Drink.
And then I drank. Rum and prune juice could end badly. You know what? It could, but I'm willing to take one for the Empire.
For the Empire. Yeah.
Wotvad. That's for the Empire. In Klingon. Yeah, I mean, it could end up with some blasting, as Smitty says.
Was salt water. I mean, isn't that an obvious assumption in his question? He said, well, the ocean is salt water. I said, well, yes, sir, it is today. That doesn't mean it was during the flood. I think.
But we have... So the great thing is, right?
It might not have been during the thing that didn't happen. Oh, okay.
We have evaporite deposits, which is the kind of thing that, water leaves behind as a big standing thing dries off, from basically the entire geological column, which does a couple things. One, it completely destroys the idea that the entire geological column is from the flood, but it also means that basically from as early as we can tell, the oceans were pretty salty. But here's the other thing. Oh, Ben, there's a fan on. Is there any way we can work on that? But anyway, so the other thing is, even if the waters weren't salty at the time, if you're mixing up all the salt that apparently Kent Hovind thinks started on land in the sediments because it's being washed into the ocean, that means that it would have immediately become salty. So all the fish that were previously adapted to freshwater would have ended up in salty water. And it's just the opposite problem now. Because now all the salt apparently was just locked up on land. Now it's in the water because it's all being mixed up with the sediment. Either way, you have a salinity problem.
I think during the flood, it was probably all freshwater, or mostly freshwater, and all the animals were freshwater. And in the last 400 years, many animals have become saltwater adapted. They have adapted to saltwater. And he said, well, see, that's evolution. I said, no, sir. Today we have freshwater alligators and saltwater alligators. And
what? There are no saltwater alligators. There are what are called saltwater crocodiles, but they aren't exclusively saltwater animals, for one thing. And no, there are no saltwater alligators. There aren't any even saltwater alligatoroids, which would include caimans in with the alligators, which only exist in river systems of China and the United States. Yeah, only two countries that have alligators. Now you get caimans, and they're a bit more widespread. They're all over South America, but whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Although Cuvier's dwarf caimans are adorable.
they probably had a common ancestor.
Yeah.
An alligator.
Yes, Kent. You know what? I'm taking a drink. As with any group of organisms that you can identify, the common ancestor of that group of organisms was a member of that group of organisms. The common ancestor of all alligators was an alligator. The common ancestor of all crocodilians was a crocodilian. The common ancestor of all archosaurs was an archosaur. The common ancestor of all reptiles was a reptile. The common ancestor of all amniotes was an amniote. The common ancestor of all tetrapods was a tetrapod. The common ancestor of all sarcopterygians was a sarcopterygian. The common ancestor of all jawed vertebrates was a jawed vertebrate. At no point would that not be the case. Every time Kent Hovind points that out, it's amazingly stupid for him to say with that smug look he gets on his face, because it means nothing. If it weren't an alligator, that would pose a serious problem for evolution. Wouldn't help demonstrate creationism, but it would be a problem for evolution. If it turned out the common ancestor of alligators was a blue jay, that'd be hard to explain in evolution.
It would be a problem for Kent's version of creation, because there would literally be no point for an ark during a flood. You just need one bird to survive, and it can give birth to everything that we see today.
Yeah,
right? Because anything can give birth to anything in this magical Kent Hovind land.
Well, yeah, that seems to be how he thinks evolution operates, but spoilers, it's not.
Not even close.
He said, well, see, that's evolution. I said, man, come on, think about it.
I'm thinking about it, yes. The descent of all alligators from a common alligator ancestor is in fact evolution. Just like the descent of all, I don't know, bilaterians, which is basically everything that isn't like a sponge or a jellyfish or a cone jelly. Yeah, all of those have a common ancestor that was itself a bilaterian. But I'm going to go ahead and say that crabs and humans coming from a common ancestor is evolution. But, you know, Chinese alligators and North American alligators coming from a common ancestor is also evolution. It's just a shorter scale of it.
Going from freshwater alligator to a saltwater alligator is a very minor change compared to what you think happened.
Oh yes, apparently it is also spring. So happy spring, Aztec Dragon. But we, of course, are celebrating Empire Day.
Empire Day.
So, won't judge, productive judge. May you enjoy Empire Day.
You think they changed from a rock to an alligator?
No? Chat.
No,
You pet loot.
no person thinks that.
Which, of course, would be a very big change. There was a fella in Minnesota.
Those aren't even all alligators. He can't even label his own slide correctly. Kent, alligator and crocodilian aren't synonyms. You know what? Which means I'm drinking again. In case anyone needs to know. I mean, my goodness, there's clearly at least 2 crocodiles, and I can't see the top right very well, although it does look like an alligator. But, like, come on, dude. You're... oh... It's like putting up a picture of a fox and a wolf and a bear and being like, this is a picture of foxes. No, it's not. And the thing is, like, I get it. For a lot of people who aren't up on, like, the whole, like, archosaurs and identifying reptiles and whatnot, it's not always easy to tell the difference. And part of that is just because these animals are very much unlike humans, and humans have a tendency to find it easier to draw distinctions between animals the more close they are to humans, right?
That's not unique to humans either.
No. But the thing is that alligators and crocodiles aren't actually all that similar looking. Now, they do have similar lifestyles, so they have some superficial similarities. And that is a big reason why, you know, they have broadly the same sort of, like, body shape and stuff like that. And, of course, they're more closely related to each other than they are to, say, like, you know, birds, which are their next closest living relatives. Which is a pretty distant relation, right? We're going all the way back into, like, the late Permian or early Triassic in terms of when the common ancestor would have lived. So fair enough. I mean, they're not very closely related. But no, you cannot just label a bunch of crocodilians as alligators. Not all crocodilians are alligators. There are also crocodiles, there are caimans, there are gavials, there's the false gavial. I mean, all of these are different groups.
And I wish I'd written down the details, but anybody could try this experiment, I suppose. He came to me after a seminar one time, and he said, Mr. Hovind, I raise fish. I love fish. I have an aquarium. I have 2 aquariums, actually.
Ooh. I like how he tells this story as if it's unusual to have 2 aquaria.
Show off. My dentist had 2 aquaria.
Ooh. You should get 2 aquaria.
I love those fish, but I was always so nervous to get my teeth worked on.
Bent, you should just get 2 aquaria. 1 saltwater, 1 freshwater. Do it.
I'll think about it.
Okay.
Huge aquariums in my house.
Ooh, they're huge.
He said I have a saltwater aquarium and a freshwater aquarium.
Drink for a prediction. I'm calling it. That's a prediction. Also, this might be one of those situations, which is, you know, things that didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
Yeah. But we don't know yet.
He said, I know that ocean water is about 3.6% salt. He said, I got curious many years ago. I wondered if I could mix all my fish together. He said, so I figured out the mathematics behind slowly increasing the salt in my freshwater aquarium. Because every few weeks you got to change the water, you know, change half of the water every 2 weeks or something like that. So he did all the math on how to add salt to his freshwater and subtract salt from his saltwater aquarium. He did it very slowly so that it took him 10 years to make the change.
All right, I'm already going to call it.
Fish don't live 10 years.
That's actually a part of the problem. Most fish you're going to put in that aquarium will be long dead before you get to this point. And new fish you introduce from the fish store or whatever, the pet store, I guess, aren't going to be used to your weird salinity amounts. So, I mean, already right there, that's enough to be like, no. But yeah, this is just one of those shower thoughts that Kent had. Like, what if you took over the course of a decade 2 different fish tanks? I bet that would work. Gee, I hope my first 3 wives don't leave me.
After 10 years, both aquariums were 1.8% salt.
Sure.
All of the fish doing fine,
Yeah, some
No.
fish.
and so we mixed them all together.
Chat.
Now, if somebody can do that in 10 years, going from 0 to 1.8% salt,
Sorry?
Show me that paper.
Wait, did he just say 0 to 1 point? Hold on. We have to go back a bit, because if he said from 0% salt, if Kent Hovind thinks that fresh water from a river is 0% salt, then where does the salt come from that's going into the oceans, Kent? Is it not being carried by the rivers? Hold on. I have to hear this
Where
again.
it came from before the rivers anyway.
Hold up.
now, if somebody can do that in 10 years, going from 0 to 1.8,
Oh my goodness, it is! Oh my goodness, Kent! Fresh water isn't at 0% salt! Fresh water isn't distilled water you could buy at the grocery store. There's a reason they have to distill it. It's because even freshwater sources don't have 0% salt. Oh my goodness. What a moron. Okay.
salt, do you think in 4,400 years the fish or animals could adapt to a salt change from 0 to 3.6%? Well, that's no problem.
It might not be. That might actually be true. I don't know. But you don't have any evidence that that's what happened. And the things that you've been saying so far aren't evidence of it.
Show me
The
that
evolutionists
paper.
are great at straining out gnats and then swallowing camels. They will pick on one little detail they don't agree with on the creation account, like how to know if it all those animals on the boat. I said, well, I don't know. So I say, you couldn't be done. Just because I don't know doesn't mean it couldn't be done.
Oh, you mean arguments from incredulity are invalid, Kent? Is that what we're going with? You know what? Just take a drink. Because the fact that Kent Hovind right now is calling out arguments from incredulity as being invalid, when that is like a huge portion of what he does in all of his seminars, is just it's amazing.
Okay. Secondly, the fact that this is an unanswered question so far doesn't prove we all came from a rock.
Because, Kent, once again, unanswered questions in science doesn't mean that things didn't happen. So the fact that no one knows exactly how abiogenesis worked, or the fact that no one knows exactly what some particular most recent common ancestor looked like exactly, or which species it was exactly, doesn't mean none of this happened. And Sphincter of Doom for $5 says, late to the party, but Kent should stick to the rivers and the streams that he's used to, not what version congeals in his imagination. Oh yeah, okay, fair enough. Not what version congeals in his imagination. Thank you very much, Sphincter of Doom. And now we're only $90 away from my next tutu video on YouTube. So, you know, get in those super chats if you want to, or just don't. Because, I mean, who cares?
Yeah, who cares? It's
For a
just
little bit.
Yeah.
It's how I buy my dinner.
Oh, yeah.
Strain out the gnat and swallow a camel. They're just really good at it. So the saltwater to freshwater change probably took place after the flood, and even today there are huge salt domes underground that are leaking into the oceans. The ocean is gaining salt from all sorts of places.
But how did the salt get into the dome in the first place, Kent? Because I happen to know, because I looked into salt domes recently, not for any particular reason, just because I thought they were kind of cool, that actually they tend to come from evaporite deposits. And then heat underneath the evaporite deposit from geothermal activity pushes the dome up. So you need to have a salty ocean in the first place to get the salt to push up into a dome, Kent. There aren't other options. In fact, even creationist models for salt dome formations, which while they don't predict where they're going to exist, they kind of bother to explain if you accept the weird, crazy creationist assumptions. But even they still require the salt to pre-exist as a layer of evaporite, which they don't bother to explain how that got there, because it can't under the flood model.
In Grand Saline, Texas, halfway from Longview to Dallas, the town called Grand Saline. Saline means salt.
Yep.
Years ago, it was discovered right on the surface of the ground there was pure salt. Animals would stop there and lick it all the time. So they began to dig it out and sell it. And they kept digging down and found out it's what's called a salt plume. It is absolutely enormous. There are hundreds and hundreds of people that work at this salt mine, if I understand it. Here's the surface of the ground. They had seen a little patch of salt right here. It turned out to be a massive salt plume. Apparently, from way down deep inside the earth, this was hot and bubbling, and it came up and solidified just before it popped out through the surface.
All right, Kent, so how under a flood do you explain the existence of rock salt that is primarily evaporated salt water? I want to know, because he's talking about geological formations made of things that generally get deposited by evaporating water inside the geological column that he thinks was deposited by the flood, the very opposite of evaporating water.
It's pure salt.
Oh no, it's not
They
pure,
dig into
sure,
it with
whatever.
bulldozers and backhoes and everything else. I mean, it's gigantic. It's many miles across of solid, pure salt. Be a good thing for you to do, Eric, is to look up salt in the encyclopedia and just read it, and you can see some of the pictures of this. When they dig it out, of course, you can't just dig it all out because your roof falls in. So they will dig tunnels down and dig shafts off to the side. And even when they're digging off to the side, they can't dig a big area out because the roof falls in. If you looked at it from the top, they dig what's called a checkerboard pattern. They leave little squares of pillars to hold the roof up. And they dig out everything in between. And they've calculated, how hard is the salt, how much weight can it hold, and how big does our pillar have to be, et cetera, et cetera. They want to dig out the maximum without having it collapse on them. So they can only actually mine a certain percentage of it, maybe 40%, and the rest is wasted just as structural support.
Could just do an open surface mine, but hey, Mothra came by. So, Mothra vad petut.
It's that way with any underground mine. They have to leave some material behind. So the salt in the ocean is not a problem for the creationists. Probably the oceans were largely freshwater at the time of the flood. There may have been some mixing of water. May have been some saltwater animals before the flood. Maybe saltwater lakes like we have today. I don't know. But this is no problem we have to worry about. All right, let's take a little break. When we come back, we'll discuss some more ways to show the Earth is not millions of years old.
And actually, that's a pretty good spot for us to take a quick break too, because I need to refresh my Empire Day drink. And of course, remember, for those of us who are just joining us, we are celebrating Empire Day. Empire Day, of course, is the anniversary of the first airing of Errand of Mercy on Star Trek The Original Series, the first episode to feature Klingons, which is why we've got a nice fluttery Klingon banner, why we've got a picture of a Klingon bridge in the background, why there's a Klingon ship running around, and why we're speaking a little bit more Klingon than normal. But Maj. But we are going to go with the intermission video. I'm going to refresh my drink. I don't know what Kent Hovind's going to do. Who knows? There's no way to know what he does during breaks. It's nebulous.
It's nebulous, yeah.
But anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the quick break, and we will be back in just a few minutes.
I want to take a moment to talk about something serious. There is a problem facing late surviving non-avian dinosaurs in modern America. Hunting is very strictly regulated, and only allowed at certain times of the year. This means that for much of the year we have to rely on farm-raised food, which means money. If you want to help a starving dinosaur, please consider donating on Patreon, or buying from my merch store. Links are in the description. Please help. Dinosaurs all over YouTube are depending on you to help them through the hunting off-season.
Oh, Nani? Dare? Oh, Gojira desu ka? Hi, Gojira-san. Hi. Okay, we are back. And for anyone who might just be joining us now, we are doing Kent with Bent 54, Kent of Mercy, or Hovind of Mercy, sorry. Based, of course, on the original series episode, Errand of Mercy, which aired on this day, March 23rd, 1967, for the first time, introducing the world to the Klingon Empire, or as it calls itself, Klingon Wo. So, of course, this is Wotjaj, which is why we are drinking prune juice. And I'm drinking it with rum, because it's a warrior's drink. And just to remind everyone why it's a warrior's drink, here's a little clip from a show you might have heard of, Star Trek.
What is it?
Just try it. You see? Prune juice.
Warrior's drink.
So there you go. I hope everyone is still with us, and maybe a few new people have joined in, and here we go. Let's get some more Kent Hovind in, because he took a break, and we took a break. So, I give you more Kent Hovind.
All right,
Kent?
let's continue now
there he
with
is.
some ways to show the Earth is not millions of years old. By the
Yay.
way, for the quiz next week, we will have, or whenever the next quiz is, we'll have one of the questions will be, what is the quiz?
I like that. Like, for the quiz next week, not that there's necessarily gonna be a quiz next week, just, whenever. Like, yeah, okay, Kent. That's, like, the most obvious.
We're gonna start doing quizzes.
We should. Pop quizzes. Winner gets,
Nothing.
they get honor for their house. Get 3 honor points that you can spend at any Klingon honor establishment. I don't know.
The erosion rate of the Niagara River. And the rate is, of the Niagara Falls, the rate is 4.7 feet a year is the current rate right now.
Oh yeah, he never did tell us how that meant the Earth was young. He just said a bunch of stuff about it, switched to ocean salinity. Chip.
What is the evolutionist's answer to why the Niagara River or gorge is only 7.5 miles long? What's their answer to that?
What's the question?
Why is the Niagara River only so long? And the answer, of course, is
That's
just...
how long it is.
Yeah, because the Niagara River didn't start eroding at the beginning of time, Kent. That's why.
Is that what he assumes?
I'm going to go ahead and say that that's my prediction.
I say try.
Kit.
Not proven, but interesting theory. Okay. When
That was the So if the Earth were millions of years old, the gorge should be like trillions of miles long or something like that.
It should
Like,
cut
is that what
clear
you're
across
expecting?
North America.
It
should be the Pacific
Ocean. The world loops over again and again and again. Like, I don't know what he...
Look, it's the same thing as, like, there's a pimple on my butt that's 3 weeks old, therefore that's how old I am.
Hey, well, your butt's 3 weeks old. We don't know about the rest of you.
Yeah, and the Venroli points out that it only started eroding at the end of the last ice age. Right, exactly. There is no reason to think that it has been eroding longer than that. Which, by the way, reminds me, I am working on trying to get someone on the channel to interview them who is working on an RPG, which is not something I would normally talk about, but it has a linguistic angle to it. So hopefully, I haven't heard back yet, so I'm not super expecting this to be a thing, but it might be a thing. So there might be a point on some point on the channel where I interview a game developer who is working on a game that includes a constructed language. I would be asking him about the language-related stuff. So anyway, here's more Kent.
Water drips through the ground. Yes, sir. There certainly were at least one major ice age, a couple of theories about when it was. When ice melts back, when a glacier melts.
By the way, I like that this student actually came up with the whole, like, wait, wouldn't it have started at the end of the Ice Age? Because, you know, all the glacial deposits? Yeah, it would have, Kent. And for $2 from Vandalian 1998, we have, you heard Kent, Ice Age, not proven. Well, he thinks there was an Ice Age, so, you know. Also, Vandalian 1998 and Sphincter of Doom, you're both channel members. You could be making this drink by typing in kaiju emojis, but you're not, and it confuses me.
Back, it leaves behind obvious signs, like piles of rocks that it piles up called a drumlin or a kettle lake or terminal moraines. There's obvious glacial effects that are found all over Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois.
New Hampshire, New York, Massachusetts, Maine, Oregon, Washington, Montana. Yeah, lots of them. But you know what? Overall, Luch Kent Toch Patluk. Hey, Mr. Sirius is here to help us celebrate Empire Day. Welcome, Mr. Sirius. Thank you for being a recent channel member. I think I have you added to the member Discord. Remember, anyone who joins the channel, unfortunately, I don't have an easy, automatic way to add you to the Discord. So you're gonna have to send me a message on like Twitter or Discord itself if you have me as a mutual from another server or something, or just email me at the.dapper.dino.yt@gmail.com. And I will make sure to send you a link. I usually send out a one-time use link that expires after 7 days. So there you go. It's automatic if you join the Patreon, but yeah, you know.
No question, ice came clear down to Kansas City, Missouri. The question is, when did this happen? And we get into that quite a bit in video number 6 of my series on the Hovind theory about when was the Ice Age and all this kind of stuff.
I love that even in this series where he's like, oh, I'm going to be doing the deep dive on everything. This is like my seminar times 1,000,000. You're gonna get college credit for this. He's also still hawking his DVDs, or at this point, it was probably still his VHSs.
You'll have to watch that though to find out.
Yeah.
Okay, when water goes through the ground, it soaks through the ground. If it is on decaying plant material, when plants decay, it produces what's called carbonic acid. Carbonic acid is one of many, many different acids.
You know what? Technically, that's true. Let's drink for it. Carbonic acid is one of many kinds of acid. Like I said, I'm being generous today. Look, I can't go in... Okay, so here's the thing.
I don't want to drink every time Kent Hovind gets every little tiny sentence.
Okay, here's the thing, though. If I'm not generous and in a good mood, I'm going to be a jerk when it comes to my next stream, which is happening not long after I finish this one.
I'm just not that thirsty, that's all.
Take small sips.
Not a dish.
Okay.
It dissolves limestone.
Okay.
You take boric acid or battery acid or muriatic acid.
Muriatic acid? Okay.
Which is hydrochloric, the same stuff in your stomach.
Oh, he was right about that too. Petlut. And you weren't believing me when I said it. Now that Kent Hovind has said it, now do you believe me that muriatic acid is your stomach acid?
I thought it was hydrochloric acid.
It is. It's the same thing.
I didn't know it was the same thing.
Oh, well.
Kent just taught me something. Gross.
Hydrochloric acid that adjusts your food. You can buy muriatic acid at the hardware store for $2 a gallon.
He also did
and you pour it on concrete driveways. You'll see it foam and bubble. And if you leave it there long enough...
What's that?
Just vomit on the driveway.
Yeah, seriously.
It'll eat a hole through your driveway. It'll dissolve your concrete.
Ooh.
eats it right off. Well, slightly acidic water, the stronger the acid is, the faster it eats the rock, okay? Particularly limestone. Well, when it rains on a forest, the dead leaves and stuff laying there are going to decay and produce carbonic acid. This soaks into the ground, and so the water soaking through the ground is slightly acidic, which dissolves limestone. And that's what makes caves down in the ground, like Carlsbad Caverns and the major cave systems all over the world. Missouri alone, just that one state, has over 5,000 known caves. Plus, who knows how many, of course, that aren't known.
Yep, that's how things being unknown works. Okay, I'm with you.
But the caves are, many parts of the world contain caves, and Missouri, Arkansas has lots of them because there's just lots of limestone. So this acid dissolves.
You know, here's an interesting thing about there being lots of limestone, which is true. But limestone, all limestone that we know of, has a really slow deposition rate. And it is the kind of thing that deposits out of a sea or ocean very extremely slowly. So the fact that there are in fact significant limestone deposits by itself precludes young Earth creationism. I just want to point that out there. And if you want to learn more, there's a great video on Guts and Gibbons' channel where I will be appearing later on tonight about limestone. Check her channel out.
Just go watch it, guys. Just
well,
go
not
to
right
her
now.
channel.
Wait till after.
Wait till after and then go to her channel and watch. Gosh.
I know, right?
the limestone. When it starts to drip, this water dripping containing the dissolved minerals, the air blows past, evaporates the water, and leaves the minerals behind, and it starts to leave a formation.
Okay.
In a cave, if it's hanging from the ceiling, it's called a stalactite, sticking tight to the ceiling. If it's sticking on the ground, it's called a stalagmite.
Ooh, petite.
If they join together, it's called a column. And if it just drips out of a long crack across the ceiling, it makes what's called a ribbon. As there's a long ribbon shaped like a piece of sun. And they have all kinds of fancy names for them when you go into the cave. They say, oh, this is the bacon formation, because it looked like a piece of bacon or something.
Yum.
Of course, they're trying to get your tourist dollars, is bottom line. But the fact is,
yeah.
caves are filling in with stalactites or stalagmites.
What are you doing, Kent?
I know, right?
You're telling lies.
Computer Harlow asks CRPG or tabletop. Tabletop is the answer to that.
Whether it's hanging on the ceiling or sitting on the floor or just making a big pile, it's called flow stone because it's rock that was flowed into place, for lack of a better phrase. This picture shows Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico, and it says, this unfinished symphony was started 250 million years ago. Now, how do they know that?
Well, there's a few things. One is they can probably test various, igneous depositions or below and above to get a, sort of maximum minimum range. And also, because we happen to know about how fast limestone, which is different from calcium, which is what you're going to talk about later, I'm making a prediction. Since we know how fast that can deposit in flowstone, we can make estimates as to how long it would take to form all of these stalagmites, stalactites, and columns and whatnot. That's how.
Well, somebody measured how fast these things grow, and then they calculated it takes 1,000 years to grow an inch. And based on...
Did they calculate it, Kent, or did they measure it? Because you can go into a cave and you can measure how fast things are happening.
Somebody's test that it takes 1,000 years to grow an inch, they measure how big this is in, Carlsbad Caverns and say, wow, this took 250 million years. Well, this is just plain not true. Those things grow very quickly. Here's a bat covered up with flowstone before he could even rot.
Calcium. Okay, great. Calcium is not limestone, Kent, so I'm taking a drink. I'm going to take a drink for everything that he shows that's just calcium concretions or deposits on top of something that isn't limestone.
National Geographic, 1953. October issue. Now, how long would it take a bat to rot after he died?
A few weeks.
A few days, couple of weeks, maybe at the most.
Yeah.
In a cave where it's, dark and cool, he may last longer, maybe a month. Something else is going to eat him, right?
Maybe.
Certainly not millions of years. We could agree with that, right?
Yeah.
The decay rate may vary greatly depending on lots of factors, but certainly not millions of years. Most caves are about 55 degrees.
I have no idea if that's accurate. Maybe.
I think it's about
Summer and winter,
relatively
doesn't matter. It's about 55
pretty
degrees down there.
humid and pretty. The year-round, their temperature is pretty.
Yeah, it's pretty constant.
It's pretty standard,
Yeah.
constant. So the one I went to in San Antonio, I think it was about 72, but it was really humid though in that cave. I think I don't remember the temperature, but they told us for the tour they just wanted my tourist money.
I mean, they did, and I assume you gave it to them.
Yeah, because sometimes you go to a museum or the zoo or some natural bridge caverns.
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with
Texas.
I don't think there's anything wrong with tourism. Kent seems to for some reason. I don't know why Kent is all like, capitalism bad. He seems like the kind of guy who would normally be like, yay, capitalism, but
Okay. So the bat's not going to be refrigerated. It's not like a refrigerator. It is.
I mean, you just said 55 degrees. It's not that far off from a refrigerator in terms of Fahrenheit.
It's chilly, but it's not below freezing.
Okay, so Kent doesn't know the difference between a refrigerator and a freezer. Got it. There we go. We just confirmed that. Happy Empire Day, everybody.
This bat covered up with the flow stone indicates it certainly did not take thousands of years for this to happen. Under the Lincoln Memorial, down in the basement of the Lincoln Memorial, there are stalactites. Now, this picture was taken...
Formed from concrete, which is not limestone. In fact, if I remember correctly, concrete is mostly calcium. But either way, it's not limestone. Taking a drink, so Petluk.
Taken back in the 60s. These are 50-inch long stalactites called a soda straw stalactite. Very long, skinny stalactite. Over time, it'll get longer and fatter. It'll thicken up. Now, the Lincoln Memorial was finished in 1922. This picture was taken about 1960-something. So in 40 years, you get a 50-inch long stalactite. So tell me, do they grow an inch every 1,000 years?
Do those grow an inch every 1,000 years? No. Do the ones in, say, Carlsbad Cavern? Yes, because they're not the same chemistry, and you're either a liar or a dummy, Kent, and I'm going to have to go ahead and say maybe both, although I do like the tie.
No. Something is wrong with their calculations, right?
Or you're comparing apples and oranges. I mean, it really is. It's like, it takes a few years for a pineapple to grow completely.
What?
Yeah. But did you know that apples grow every season in a few months?
No, but pineapples take a couple years to grow, though, so therefore you're lying.
Yeah, that's the same argument that we're getting here. One kind of stalactite can form fast, therefore they all can. Nope, sorry, Kent, that's just not how things work. Different chemistries cause different rates of deposition, whether it be flowstone or sediment or whatever.
This is from Fort Pickens. If you go down to Fort Pickens, they've got the old Confederate fort made out of brick. Then they've got the newer fort, which is also fenced off because it was built for World War I believe. It's all concrete and steel, but the steel is all rusting, so they've got that part fenced off. How many of you know what I'm talking about out there? The new Fort Pickens that you can't even get in. If you can get a guide to take you in there, unlock the gate, and go into the Fort Pickens that was built for World War... Does anybody know, was it World War I or World War II? The part that's fenced off. I don't remember either.
Probably two.
Ken, what are you talking about? Get to your topic.
He's talking about a Confederate fort that was built over for some reason. I don't know what it has to do with the age of the Earth.
Nothing. He's on like a 7th tangent right
Yeah.
Coastal batteries? Okay. In there, all over inside this fort, the old part of the fort, which has not been used, not even open to the public for many years because it's unsafe, with everything falling apart in there. There are stalactites.
He would know
One guy
about unsafe property.
That's true. Let's see. So we know of at least one kidnapping from his property. We know that there's someone who's been convicted of child molestation who's frequently on the property. And we know of a drowning that happened on the property of a small boy.
Okay.
In other words, don't bring your kids to Dinosaur Adventureland unless you want them to be abducted, possibly molested, and or drown. Just don't do it. It's not safe. And I have it on reasonably good authority that Kent Hovind is the person directing all the construction there, He doesn't know the first thing about construction, and so all of his buildings are unfit for human habitation. And they're basically all structurally unsound and not even close to up to code electrically, which means they're waiting to just collapse and then catch fire on you. So don't stay in Dinosaur Adventureland. I used to think that maybe I would do it for like a laugh, but after hearing stories about people who've gone there and helped with construction and all the ridiculously horrible stuff that they've said and that's going on there, nope, I am not gonna let the sun go down on me while I'm in this Dinosaur Adventureland. Not gonna happen.
Told me he went in there and saw off the electrical conduit boxes 16-inch stalactites. I sent a friend of mine in there some years ago, and he went down, talked to the guide, got permission to go in. He found some 2-inch stalactites growing off a refrigeration shed. Now, they say it takes 1,000 years to grow an inch. I would say this is in...
Yes, in caves made of limestone. Now, when you're dissolving concrete, it's a different story.
Indication they are not correct, right? This mine was closed down in Australia. 55 years later, they decided to go in and check out the old mine and see what's going on in there. And when they close down a mine, they usually seal the doors shut with concrete and everything.
With concrete, so not limestone blocks, Kent?
Because you don't want kids wandering around in there. What would be unsafe about an old mine?
Virtually everything.
Yeah, they support while they're digging.
This whole thing has been too stupid, so petlut. I just can't. And I'm telling you, after today, I'm going to be done with prune juice for at least a year, I think. I think maybe next Empire Day I'll have another glass of prune juice.
I haven't had prune juice since, I don't know.
Isn't this week like the first time you've ever had prune juice?
It may be, I'm sure I've tried it before, but I've probably had more than half of the prune juice in my life has been in the past 3 days.
That's just because you bought a bottle specifically for today.
Specifically for today.
Yep.
And I don't know if that bottle is going to expire in the next 12 months. We'll see.
Oh, actually, that's a fair point. Maybe we should occasionally have small amounts over the next week or two, just so we don't waste it. We'll have it with breakfast.
Why did we buy such a big bottle?
Because it was the cheapest one per volume.
Okay.
In there, they prop everything up with wood. After they leave, what's going to happen to the wood? What's the purpose of the wood being there? To hold the ceiling up. Now it's rotted, so what's going to happen? There's a good chance your ceiling's going to fall down.
Yeah.
Plus, many mines, gas develops in them. The old miners used to have canaries. They would carry a canary with them. Now they have special lanterns on their hat. If they get into certain areas of certain kinds of gas, a beeper goes off, an alarm goes off.
Lourd, petlut. Of course, that means he's right. Take a drink.
Yeah, but who here didn't already know that?
Hey, you know what? I had to go through mine safety training, so...
I'm just saying, it's not... Maybe several people didn't, but it doesn't... What does that have to do with it?
I don't know.
Toured a coal mine in
There's gas in
Birmingham.
mines sometimes.
They have the
Other
biggest
times
fan
there's
I've ever seen.
vacuums.
I would say the fan blade probably was 20 feet across. Run by a turbine engine.
Maybe.
Or no,
that's
a jet
pretty
engine
large
running this big thing, I
don't
believe it
think I
was.
can believe that.
It was
It's too
incredible.
big.
All it was doing, they dig a tunnel down to get to the coal. They dig another tunnel up out of the coal and mount a huge box over it with this big fan in it blowing out. So it's sucking air through the coal mine all the time they're down there digging. So they don't get a gas buildup. If you ever get a chance to see one of those, it's just incredible the money they have to spend just to be...
Mike B asks, is Hovind actually teaching students here, or is this theatrical/stage? No, there are students here in the audience. You'll hear them occasionally. And worse, I don't know how true this is, but Kent Hovind claimed that several colleges offered to accept attendance at this thing for credit.
Now, were those colleges Patriot Bible University or Patriot University?
I don't know. I assume that all of them were at least Young Earth Creationist universities, which in itself is one of those things where I'm like, maybe their accreditation should come into question if they're giving degrees in things like geology or astronomy or biology.
I mean, if they're getting that stuff that wrong, then those degrees are worthless.
Yeah.
Able to keep the gas out because mines build up gas. Anyway, they closed down this mine. They went to check it out 55 years later. This picture from Creation Magazine, 1998, 1998, March to May issue, shows what happened inside that coal mine in 55 years. Now, not a coal mine, inside this mine. I don't know if it was a coal mine or a lead mine or what they were mining in that one. Lead mine, okay. This is in Australia. There are 2 people inside that circle, to give you an indication. Now, if you did not know anything about when this mine was dug, and you walked in and saw these huge flowstone formations every place, to the typical evolutionist, they would assume this is millions of years old.
Robert. Hep.
I understand. I understand why you might watch this on 2x speed or 3x or 8x, just because you want Kent to get to a point.
Right. So here's the thing, right? If a quote evolutionist walks into this cave and sees these stalactites, he's going to say, "Gee, those are big." And then if he wants to know anything about them, the next thing he's going to do is find out what they're made of. And then if that doesn't help him with determining the age of whatever this structure is, he's going to do other things like, I don't know, not note what day it is, come back maybe 10, 15, even 20 years later and note what the change is. And then that would give him some idea. Not just going to walk in and be like, "Oh, it's flowstone, must be 18 trillion years old." That's not how any of this works. And the fact that Kent Hovind thinks that actual professionals in this field think that that's how that works is honestly kind of insulting to just professionals in general.
Again, how Kent is so ignorant of how academia works for professional scientists or professional mathematicians, or not even professionals, dude, because like, you don't have to be a professional scientist to know this stuff, to know that they write papers and they have peer review, and it's not just that they don't just make stuff up and get paid a bunch of money. Like,
yeah, imagine how easy it would be if science actually involved just making up whatever crap made you feel good and then just getting paid for it. When in fact, that's actually what young Earth creationism involves.
That's what Kent does.
Yeah.
When we know it's not. A couple of years ago, when Eric graduated from college in Wyoming, on the way back from Bible college where he went, we stopped in Thermopolis, Wyoming, right in the middle of the state. Thermo means heat. This is called Thermopolis because there are hot springs that bubble up out of the ground. We stopped and saw the Teepee Fountain. In 1903, a guy had a mineral spring on his property, so he stuck a pipe in it. Made the water bubble out the pipe. It
was hot mineral water. Was it all limestone, Kent? No? You're not going to tell us? You're not going to tell us what the chemistry was? You don't know?
Get to see the size of the pipe, but I would guess it's probably about a 4 or 6 inch diameter pipe.
Yeah.
The water came up at the top of the pipe and ran down the sides. As it ran down, it evaporated, some of it, leaving behind a mineral deposit. You get these under your sink. How many have seen where your sink is dripping, you get the mineral deposits build up there, okay? Or the back.
Yeah, okay, so when you have hard water, that's primarily calcium, and there is some lime, and it can deposit quickly. But the thing is that it's depositing in a sink where you're getting periodic high and then very, very low, what do you call it? Humidity, right? And that can actually build up fairly quickly. But you know what doesn't tend to happen, even if you descale a lot, is that if you leave a low drip on your faucet, that you're going to get like 4-inch long stalactites. That's not typically what's going to happen with your hard water. And believe me, around here we have extremely hard water. It still isn't what's happening. And it's still not even mostly lime. A lot of it's calcium.
Bathtub drips. Well, the guy died. And the pipe has been in his yard now for 97 years. Here's a picture of me standing next to it after 97 years.
Okay.
That would take some lime away, wouldn't it, to dissolve that?
It would also probably take something that can dissolve calcium. Maybe even rust, because it kind of looks a little rusty.
Now, they're going to tell you these formations take millions of years to form, but the simple fact is that's just not true.
No one is going to tell you that formation took millions of years. Yeah, that's the thing.
Guy had this house and he put a pipe in millions of years ago. No one thinks that, Kent.
Nope.
You just described 97. Oh my gosh. All right. That's stupid. Here.
Oh, Petsuch.
Right conditions, they can form very quickly.
Yes, I agree. Under the right conditions. Do these caves you're talking about have those conditions, Kent? Because I'm going to guess two things. I'm going to guess no, and you didn't bother to check.
So don't let anybody tell you it takes millions of years. At the current erosion rate,
Takes
the
millions
mud
of years.
slides off the mountains, or it washes out down into the ocean. Eventually, it ends up from the top on the bottom. We have landslides, mudslides, ground creep. In California, when we lived out there, there are huge areas of California. They don't allow you to build a house.
Oh, wait. TC the Unbeliever points out that Lime Away was a Hovind joke.
Was it?
Yeah. Geen oog tot wet, toch? Petsuch.
You know, I've been playing a little Grand Theft Auto again.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know, it's a pretty immersive, and some of the NPCs are like crazy people. And when Kent Hovind rambles like this, it reminds me of them rambling. It's kind of hilarious.
It reminds me of Uncle Al from The Office.
Yeah.
Nobody helped me. Even the doctor didn't know. You know what, man? I don't know what you're talking about. Pretty much all of that went over my head.
Oh, I had to do it myself.
Because when the ground gets full of water, it all slides down. The whole mountainside slides down, or just slowly creeps down. And you can see evidence of this all over the place. They put telephone poles in, and a couple years later, the pole is leaning, and pretty soon, it's laying flat on the ground because the ground is sliding down.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be safe to build there. So we have landslides, mass wasting, ground creep, avalanches. Does the ground ever fall up?
No.
No, it's always down, right? So at the current rate of erosion, estimates are the continents will erode flat in 14 million years.
Petsuch.
But why?
Okay, so Kent Hovind apparently doesn't know a few things. The biggest of which is just that things go up, right? Sure, does it fall up? No. But volcanoes push up on the crust.
There's no such thing as volcanoes.
Then when they erupt, they result in new deposition. Mountains can be built by two bits of continental plate pushing against each other, causing them to buckle up like the Himalayas.
No such thing as mountains.
Yeah. The thing is, things go up. In fact, even in the Bible, in Kent Hovind's own weird flood model, it says that the mountains rose up during the flood. So, yeah. All that has to happen for the continents to not erode flat is for there to be uplift. And the thing is, as erosion goes, the closer a surface is to sea level on average, the less quickly it will erode anyway. Right? And you can't erode below sea level in most cases. So even if it wouldn't ever actually go to flat because the amount of erosion would actually level off. Like it would go down asymptotically, and eventually it would get to so near zero it wouldn't really matter over an extremely long period of time. So even without uplift, we still wouldn't actually get everything eroded flat. So yeah.
I don't know that the number is accurate, but the concept is certainly right.
No,
the book
no,
In
it's
the Beginning
not.
by Walt Brown has great information on erosion rate of the continents, if you want to get more on that. Now here they're going to tell us we've got fossils that are 600 million years old.
And yeah, the Venerable Bee points out shallow subduction can also cause mountains to rise. That's how the Rockies formed. Yep. There are a bunch of ways that land can go up.
How does he not know that?
Well,
Willful
that's
ignorance.
300 times older. They should have washed out to sea 300 times.
Nope. No, they shouldn't
It's a
have.
fact the mountains are eroding flat. They're going to erode away. So the evolutionist answer to this is
No, Kent, there are many mountain ranges whose height is increasing. The Himalayas, the Rockies. Now, the Appalachians are sure eroding flat. Eventually, they'll be gone. But you know what? Before they started eroding on net, they were actually taller than the Himalayas. So
You know what just happened is you corrected him, and before you were done with your sentence, I started correcting him on something else. And as I was finishing that sentence, you were correcting him on another thing. That just happened just now.
Nice.
yeah, but mountains are lifting up all the time. Okay. But if your mountain is lifting up, at the same time the dirt's washing off, any fossils more than 14 million years old are going to be washed out to sea.
No, because you have to account for how quickly the mountain is going up. You don't have to assume it's starting off at equilibrium. There can be a net increase in how quick, or a net, rise in the whole thing. It could be rising way slower than it's going down. And also, erosion rates aren't constant over time. And there are some places where erosion isn't happening. In fact, deposition is happening. I'm taking a drink. Petlut.
How is he so bad at this?
Because it makes him
How
money.
Okay, how is a human being worse than I am at geology?
Now that is a damn
Right?
fine question.
How?
Yeah. And Venerable V points out the Cascades and Olympics in his backyard are also lifting up. And that is true, although that is basically because they're essentially the same mountain range as the Rockies. It's just that we call the Rockies different things at different points in where they are.
So how can you have fossils more than 14 million years old? Any place in the world. They should have washed out to sea.
Nope.
And yet they'll say they're hundreds of times older than that. I'm just pointing out this doesn't fit with the erosion rate. Okay, a couple more facts here on the age of the Earth, and we'll go on to a totally new subject next week. The first fully developed systems of word writing appeared only about 5,000 years ago, according to World Book Encyclopedia. Well, now that's interesting. If the oldest written language is 5,000 years old,
Okay.
according to them, and the oldest languages are sophisticated and complete and very modern, just even more vocabulary than we have today.
Oh. Chat. Petlut. That was stupid. Take a drink is what I just said. Okay. Look. Languages in the past were not more complex. Languages tend to actually not grow significantly more or less complex over time. When complexity decreases in one area, it tends to increase in another area in a language because the complexity of human thought really hasn't changed a whole lot, and so the ability to express complex ideas is always needed. It's just that languages tend to be complex in certain ways. So for instance, word order in languages like, say, Han Chinese or English can be very complicated. English does a lot of weird things with the word order that changes the meanings, things that a lot of other languages don't. Now, other languages, like, say, Russian, will do things, fairly complicated things, with lots of different noun classes. So if you want to go really deep into that, you can go into, like, Finnish, which no one even knows how many noun classes it has, because it's not even easy to figure it out, but it's a lot. Or you can go into things like Swahili, which, while it has a fairly free word order, but it doesn't have noun cases, so how does it work things out? Well, it primarily does so by double marking the verb with both number, person, and gender, but Swahili has like 16 noun genders, which means that based on the gender of the nouns in the sentence, you can usually figure out their grammatical role. All of these are different ways in which languages can be complex. Or you get things like Navajo, which is highly synthetic. You can shove the verb, the subject, the object, the indirect object, all just into one big old word, as well as a whole bunch of other things about like evidentiality and your attitude, mood, tense, aspect, all just get shoved into one big old verb, right? These are different ways in which languages can be complex. And there's no reason to think that human languages haven't been at about the same level of complexity for hundreds of thousands of years, because humans haven't really changed all that much genetically or even anatomically or in that time. What has happened is that our technology has improved. But that has no bearing on how complex languages are. So it's completely unremarkable that a language only 5,000 years ago would be relatively complex. But no, they're not more complex than now. Languages aren't getting dumbed down, no matter what you think. In fact, some of our earliest writing in the world is a letter in Sumerian from a father to his son in which he complains about how the young people are corrupting the language. And pretty soon everyone's going to be incomprehensibly babbling about nothing. Well, guess what? Now here we are some 5,000 years later, and we're not incomprehensibly babbling. That's just been a complaint that old people have had about the kids since the beginning of writing, apparently.
Older languages often are richer and have more descriptive words.
Nope.
Like the Inuit Indians have, 42 or 43 different words for snow.
Oh my goodness, we already covered this yesterday. So here's the thing about the Inuit and a bunch of words for snow. What actually happens is they have a fairly normal number of words for snow. Like it's, not that many. But words for snow tend to be lexically productive in those languages, which means they end up in a lot of like compound words and things like that. Which is unsurprising since snow is a pretty frequent thing. But who cares? It's not like some sign of superiority that a language has a lot of words for a particular phenomenon for which your language only has a few. Like, for instance, English is missing a bunch of words. For instance, what's the word that means a non-sex specified member of the species boss, the domesticated cattle?
Oh, there isn't one.
No.
Allegedly.
No, there isn't. You say cow, well, that's a female. You say bull, well, that's a male. Steer, that's a castrated male. Calf, that's a baby. So it's not just any old individual. We don't have a word for that in English. Other languages do. And for instance, in Latin, it was unsurprisingly boss. So, but in English, we have a whole bunch of different words to describe where you live. We've got things like apartment, home, house, condo. We've got a whole bunch of different shades of meaning about the thing you live in. So, who cares? Does that make English more or less complex than another language that has a word that just means generic member without specifying age or sex of the species boss, but it only has like 2 words to describe things people live in? I don't know. There's no way to quantify it.
The Greeks have many different words for love. We only have one.
Okay. And?
I love pizza, I love my dog, I love my wife, I love my country. But those are obviously different kinds of love.
You could find a million
They've only-
synonyms.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you look at English. English itself has one of the highest number of words of any language in the world. It's ridiculous. But sure, let's point out one place where Greek outdoes English in terms of, similar words. All right, fine. That doesn't make Greek more complicated or a richer language. Look at all the other places where English is going to supersede Greek.
We've only got one word, they have many different words. Older languages are often very complex compared to today. Well, if the
Smitty suggests bovine, but the problem is that bovine describes a whole host of animals of many species.
oldest languages are complete and sophisticated and modern, and only 5,000 years old as far as the written part. A great question I've asked evolutionists and I've never gotten an answer for it is, can you please explain to me how languages evolve from grunts and groans like animals have to sentences that portray thought?
Yeah, so we don't know for certain, but remember how Kent Hovind earlier said that the fact that there's an open question in creationism doesn't mean it didn't happen?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna point that out. Now I'm gonna say we actually know of many primates who use calls that actually reference concrete nouns, essentially, right? Like there's a call that means jaguar, and another call that means eagle, and another one that means big old snake, right? Now, that right there is already an abstract set of calls assigned to particular concepts. All that really you have to do is bring in a few things. One, you have to bring in a set of things that you can talk about in reference to where something is or what it's doing, which is not a big, like, you know, a hard bridge to gap, right? Like you have another call that means, oh, the jaguar is swimming, or it's prowling looking hungry, or it isn't paying attention to us, but we should still be cautious, right? Now you've introduced verbs. Then you can add in extra sets of calls that modify the verb or the noun to say like, oh, it's only a small jaguar or whatever. We don't have to worry that much about it. Or the jaguar is running quickly, or it's walking slowly, whatever. Right? And now you have nouns and verbs. Then you can add in another set of calls that modify the nouns. Okay, well, now you've added in adjectives. And then suddenly, you basically got a basic language. Now you can add in things like the ability to talk about the past or the future. Talk about things that aren't currently present. Now that's the biggest gap. And honestly, if you wanted to harp on how different humans are in terms of languages, that'd be where you'd want to go. But no, do we know exactly how it happened? No. Does that mean it couldn't have happened? No. Do we have things that bridge the gap between, like, you know, your basic level animal communication where, like, you know, dogs basically have, like, whimpers, whines, and barks? And then you have monkeys that have different words for different kinds of things. And then you have humans who have full-fledged languages? No, we don't have every gap or every stage in between that filled. Doesn't mean it didn't happen, as Kent himself said.
We can give somebody a concept. The sky is blue. What kind of a grunt would you have to tell an animal to do to explain to his brother or sister the sky is blue?
Here's one. The sky is blue. That's one animal telling another animal the sky is blue.
Wow.
They don't have any verbal communication like that.
To tell the sky is blue, generally no, because most animals don't depend on such information for their survival. Humans are weird in that they have ridiculously high levels of cognition, which allow them to do weird things like that. But one monkey can tell another monkey, hey, there's an eagle over there. And then they'll respond by doing things like huddling under cover, where the eagle has a hard time getting them. Or hey, there's a snake up in the trees, where they'll all drop to the ground. Or hey, there's a ground predator coming. They'll all jump up into the trees.
You know, they don't portray thoughts and concepts like we do. And they don't preserve this knowledge and write it down for the next generation.
But neither have most humans throughout history. Kent, you know that writing isn't automatic. Because right now, there are missionaries out there going into places where the language has no written form, inventing a written form, learning the language, well, first learning the language, then inventing a written form, and then putting the Bible into the language. Which means that writing isn't some automatic thing. Which means the fact that it arose at some point doesn't mean that that's the origin point for humans, because humans don't start off with the idea of writing already in their brains.
The difference between the bark...
After all of this, I'm taking a drink, so petuk.
And bees talk via dancing.
That's true.
As Hansen points out.
Also true.
Is pretty interesting if you didn't know that.
Yeah, bees are pretty awesome. And, but do you have an apiarist?
No.
No?
No.
That's too bad, because if you did, I was going to ask you if he does good work.
No, I have a bad apiarist.
And grunts
No,
and
actually
groans
don't.
and squeals of animals, and language is a gigantic gap.
In some cases, or in some ways, yes. In other ways, not so much. In fact, actually, once again, Gutsa Gibbon, whose channel I'm going to be on coming up here in less than an hour, has an excellent interview in which she interviews an expert in primate communication about the essentially gaps between non-human primate communication systems and human communication systems in the terms of language. So after you watch me on there doing a Paleozoic creature tier list, go watch that one.
That cannot be bridged. Nobody has ever come up with a solution for how languages evolved. The simplest answer is God created Adam, fully formed. He could walk, talk, name the animals, and get married first day.
But that's not an explanation for where language came from, or at least it's not a
Adam
scientific
never got
one.
married. Adam never got married. That's not in the Bible. Show me where it says in the King James Bible that Adam got married, Kent.
I probably couldn't. But the thing is,
Kent.
if you want to say that the first language arose via miracle, I can't say that I can prove you wrong, right? I don't know. But here's the thing. It's not a scientific explanation. And so in the absence of a scientific explanation, there's nothing wrong with looking for a scientific explanation.
It was a mature creation. And then the languages were confused at the Tower of Babel about 100 years or so after the flood, maybe 150 years, when everybody got confused into different languages. This was all done by the Lord.
So this sort of sets up an idea of language kinds, right? But one thing that I notice is that creationists are even more vague about what languages form a kind than others, right? Do all Afro-Asiatic languages form a kind? Or is it all Semitic languages? Or is it all Indo-European languages? Or are Romance languages a separate kind from Hellenic languages, which are a separate kind from, say, languages derived from Sanskrit? What are the actual kinds in languages? What about Finno-Ugric? Is Latvian actually related to, say, Hungarian or Finnish? Or, what are the actual lines? Why is Basque so weird? Is Japanese actually related to, oh no, I can't remember it. The other Japonic language whose name escapes me because I'm apparently an idiot today. What about
prune juice?
Yeah, basically. What about all the Sino-Tibetan languages? Are they all actually related? Is Tibetan related to the Han Chinese languages? They're very different. I mean, what about Cambodian? Is that related to the Han Chinese languages? How do you know? No actual examination of this, as far as I can tell. And if you can find me a video in which a young Earth creationist tackles this problem, please let me know, because I want to watch it. Because I have never heard them actually go into depth into linguistic genetic relationships, ever.
To just be miraculous as best I can figure out. But even still, all languages of the world...
Oh yeah, the Venerable Bede points out, you know what, and I couldn't come up with a word. Languages derived from Sanskrit are called Vedic, yeah. And I do mean Ainu. Thank you, the Venerable Bede. I assume that you have not been having as much rum as I have, because I do know those words, and my goodness, could I not come up with them for the life of me. Like, gun to my face, if you were like, come up with the word Vedic, I just couldn't. Even though it's a Star Trek word, right? Like Vedic Burial. That guy died. Spoilers.
Spoilers.
I don't mean Altaic, because Altaic is sort of been, like, not so much a thing. The Altaic hypothesis has been mostly abandoned, Tiktaalik. It was a fun one, and I liked it when it was still viable. I was sort of a fan, but it's kind of gone the way of the dodo in terms of scientifically viable hypotheses, as far as I know. I know Atheist Jr. sometimes joins, and if he's here, let me know about Altaic. Ainu is not an isolate, actually. So Ainu and Japanese are now pretty well established to be in a language family. Which means that since the Japanese and the ethnic Ainu are not closely related genetically, what probably happened is actually the people who are currently the ethnic Japanese ended up slowly migrating into Japan over the course of several generations, and they picked up the language that is the common ancestor of Japanese and Ainu. And then, as a result of subsequent ethnic isolation, the Japanese language became significantly divergent from Ainu over the course of probably tens of thousands of years. And then, as the Japanese displaced the native Ainu ethnically, that language became the dominant language on the Japanese islands. Because originally the idea was that both Ainu and Japanese were isolates, but since then, a lot more work has been done, which have linked them both into a Japonic family. So, Japanese and Ainu are no longer technically language isolates. They form an extremely small family called Japonic, which unites Japanese and Ainu.
Thought processes. They will have nouns to describe objects, and then they have adjectives. Noun to name the object, and adjective to describe it. Isn't it interesting that all languages have that same thinking process?
They don't, though. They absolutely don't. There are languages in which adjectives are essentially verbs. So then what? In fact, Klingon is one of those. Every adjective in Klingon is actually a verb. There you go. But yeah, not every language has adjectives. In fact, in many languages, adjectives are actually nouns. For instance, in Semitic languages, all adjectives are actually nouns. So it's not the case that we have adjectives and nouns as separate or separate word classes in every language. That simply isn't how languages go, because that's stupid. Petlut. because this is like really basic linguistics, right? Like I have a book that's a general course in linguistics. And it's like Linguistics 101, the textbook, right? And this is the kind of stuff that occurs early on in this book. Like, hey, the word categories that you're used to in English don't apply to all languages. There are languages in which adjectives are not a separate word class, where they're just verbs or nouns.
You speak Russian, Ukrainian, and English. And if you think about it, you know, your thought process in each one is similar. Now in Spanish, they put the adjective after the noun. See the tree, big, green, and beautiful? You know, we would say, see the big, green, beautiful tree. They put the adjectives after the noun, but still, it's the same idea. You're describing a word with other words. And we can go on all day on languages. There's been many books written about that.
I actually kind of wish he would. I want to know what Kent Hovind's take on languages is, because he has barely any. And by the way, hi, Science Side Out. I'm sorry that we're actually almost done, but well, just hang in there. We're celebrating Empire Day, and I'm going to be wishing everyone a happy Empire Day over on the next stream I'm going to be a part of. So, which actually, I don't know if you're going to be a part of that one. So if you are, then I'll see you there.
It's how that languages simply could not have evolved. They had to be created.
We know that languages do evolve. That's the crazy thing.
Chinese calendar says this is the year 4697.
Okay.
Now that's interesting. If the Earth is billions of years old, why doesn't some culture have an older calendar than that?
I don't know, Kent. If my oldest scar is 3 years old, why don't I have an older scar than that? Who cares? It's irrelevant. Calendar start dates don't really matter to the question of how old is the Earth.
Some have argued that the Egyptian calendar is older than that. They will say it goes back, I think, 5,500 years or something like that.
Yes, most of the, actually, as far as I know, all of the proposed dates for Egyptian chronology go back farther than your proposed idea of how long ago the flood was.
The problem with the Egyptian calendar, these guys obviously liked their pharaoh, or they had to pretend they liked their pharaoh or lose their head. You know, they built these massive temples to bury them in. They greatly exaggerated how long they were pharaoh.
That's actually less true than it was in Mesopotamia, which is also where we get all those genealogies in the Bible. So I'm going to take a quick drink for how hypocritical Kent is being here. So,
I just checked. There's calendars that are older than the age of the Earth.
Oh, what's the oldest one you found?
Well, they're like kind of variations as a calendar or not, right? But I think it was at least 10,000 years into possibly 20,000 years.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
And again, this is a calendar, but it's a large rock that measures where the sun is throughout the day and all that.
Okay.
Essentially.
Well, I'm going to be shutting this down basically right now. We're going to be ending this, and I'm going to be grabbing myself some wonderful gach, which I made earlier today, which of course is serpent worms who have been starved for a few days, and then you drop them in a pot of sauce, and they eat up all the sauce, and then you serve them live. Although these I made earlier today, so now they have been killed and refrigerated, so, you know, it's not going to be as good as when they were wriggling on the way down. What's that?
Tweet out the picture?
I did not tweet out the picture. I'll tell you what, if people want me to tweet out the picture, leave comments on this video, and if I get 50 comments from different people telling me to tweet out the picture of my gach, I will do so. And I'll put a link to it on my community tab. So there you go. But, channel news real quick. Actually, first, Bent, besides coppermagma.com, do you have anything you want to plug?
No.
Okay, so go to coppermagma.com, where Bent's band posts free music, completely free. You can download it. Yeah, so just go get free music. coppermagma.com. Let's see, what else would I want to boost? Oh, hey, Klingon Pop Warrior, who allowed me to use one of her songs in one of my videos, which was her Klingon translation of My Heart Will Go On. She has recently dropped a new EP. It's available on Bandcamp, iTunes, and a few other places. You can go to KlingonPopWarrior.com, I believe, and get. You can't download it from there, but you can play the EP from there. So check that out if you like some Klingon language music, because, you know, it is Empire Day, and she did just drop that recently. Let's see. Thursday there will be a video. I think it will be the video about seahorses that I did with Jackson. So if you like seahorses, watch that. Saturday there's going to be a Leaving Earth Creationism. Then of course the next Tuesday will probably be Kent with Bent. Although we did actually have a few other options in mind as to what else it might end up being. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but count on Kent with Bent, and if it's something else, then hey, it's something else. Let's see, what else is there? I'm going to be on Gutsa Gibbons' channel. If any of my mods could put a link to her channel or the upcoming live stream that she's going to be doing in about a half hour-ish, that would be awesome. And that's it. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Happy Empire Day. And you know what? Khapla Bakje.
I'd like to just take a moment to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above: Kent Hovind, Ian Chen, Chris Love, Sphincter of Doom, and The Venerable Bede. My channel members and patrons help make this a much more stable income, because as you might know, ad income varies wildly from month to month, even with the same number of views. And it really helps this channel stay on the air. But if a monthly pledge, or a yearly pledge, which I have now activated, isn't right for you, there's a merch store linked in the description, and every like, share, and subscription really helps the channel grow. Also, those pledging $10 or above will have access to free 3D art assets, including materials and models, which will be made for Blender by me and can be used in any project without crediting me